So, fat is bad. Is fat so bad? We're being brought up thinking that fat is bad. So throughout the 80s, the Australian government, the American government, they got on board to promote to us that fat is bad. And it's had a stigma attached to it to think that if you have less in your diet, you're going to be healthier. So the food industries, they got on board and everything started coming out with 99% fat-free. You started seeing it everywhere. Now the problem with this low-fat idea is that a lot of low-fat foods, they started to become a lot more processed. So these health industries, they came along and they made a lot of these processed foods, but they were low in fat and they had 98% fat-free and they still tasted good, but they were just so heavily processed. I remember I was saying before that the more you process a molecule, the less your body understands what it is, and what it doesn't understand is a toxin to your body and your body wants to get rid of it. Well, that's what that is. And the other thing is that a lot of foods that are low in fat are actually high in sugar. So it's got to taste good and the calories have got to come from somewhere. So they're going to pump up the sugar instead. So is fat bad? Yes and no. But let's have a look at why fat is bad. So, fat is very high in calories. Now you've got your proteins, you've got your carbohydrates, and you've got your fats. All right, so for every gram of protein and for every gram of carbohydrate, it's going to cost you 4 calories. All right, so you have this much carbohydrate, it's going to cost you 4 calories. Now the same thing's for proteins. You have 1 gram of protein, it's going to cost you 4 calories as well. Now, to have 1 gram of fat, that's at least double, more than double, which equals being a whole whopping 9 calories per gram of fat. So you have this much protein, this much fat, this much carbohydrate, and they all look the same, but it's very deceiving, and that's why fat is bad. The other reason why fat is bad is because most of the time it comes in a liquid form. So no matter where you buy your food from, whether it's a takeout joint or whatever, they're going to fill it up with fat. Okay? The fat tastes very good and it makes your food very palatable, which means it's very easy to eat. All right? It also makes the sugar in the food taste much better. It slides down your throat a lot easier and you feel like you're having a good meal. So when you're looking at this food that you take out, you have a look at, you've got protein there, you've got your carbohydrate there. Well, it's a good meal, but it tastes so good. Why does it taste so good? It's a little bit shiny, maybe a bit oily, and you can't see it. So it's deceiving. And that's why fat is bad. So have you heard about when you have a jar and they fill it up with stones and they say, oh, is it full? And they say, no, it's not full. And then they put in the sand, they say, oh, is it full now? They say, no, it's not full. And then they put that water in and then that fills to the top. Now it's the same as what fat is. All right, so these food chains, and it doesn't matter which one you get, you can't trust any of them. All right, I mean, you're going to feel ripped off if you have food from wherever in the food court and it doesn't have fat in it. Basically, it's going to be a bit dry, it's not going to be as palatable, it's not going to make the sugar in it taste so good, it's not going to slide down your throat so easy, and the thing is you're not going to get that full off it because the fat is so high in the calories. So they're going to put, no matter if you go to a restaurant, what they do is they put fat in it. All right, and it makes you so full. So you say, oh, that place is good. Like it filled me up. I'm satisfied now. I had my protein, had my carbohydrate. Done good. But what's been disguised in there is the fat that's in there. So to put it in context, you have this much carbohydrate, this much protein, and it's just going to have, and then fat is going to cost you this much, even though it looks the same, or even if it doesn't look like it's there at all. Now that's one reason why fat is bad. Now there's different types of fats, and simply, and I'm just going to make it so basic. It's not this basic, but I'm going to make it simple for you. We've got good and bad fats. So we have on our worst side of the scale is our trans fats. Yeah, it's our processed fats. You're going to find that in your fast food, in your takeout food, in your packaged food. That's the trans fats, and that's the bad stuff. All right, that's the one that we don't want. Yeah, so that's a bad fried foods as well. Now you also got saturated fat. Now that's classified as a bad fat too, and you mainly find that from your animal products. Now I don't think that's that bad. You need a little bit of saturated fat. You don't need any trans fats, but you need a little bit of saturated fats, but they're still classed as a bad fat. Now the reason why they're classed as a bad fat is because it's known as a LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol, you see this guy here, he's got like devil horns on there and his fork. He's a bad guy, all right, LDL cholesterol. So if you're going to go and get your blood work done, you go to a doctor and you get your blood test and you have a look at the cholesterol on there. LDL cholesterol, that's a bad one, the one that you don't want. So you also got your good fats as well, and they're your polyunsaturated fats. All right, so your polyunsaturated fats are basically your margarine, your fish oils. So they're a processed fat, but they're still good for your body. We'll see why later. So they're so like your margarine and whatnot, and they're processed, but your body still understands what they are. Now, the cream of the crop, the holy grail of fats, is your monounsaturated fats. Now, this is your olive oil, canola oil, your nuts, your avocados, and your fish, and these fats are classed as a HDL cholesterol, and he's got a halo above him. So you see that these two are at war with each other, and you have your good versus your evil in the realm of fat world. So let's have a look at how they verse each other, and let's have a look at bad fats first. So when you eat fats, the bad fats, they break down your stomach, processed by your liver, and when they enter your bloodstream, you're going to get all these different little fatty acids. All right, now these fatty acids are flowing through your bloodstream. Remember I was telling you about your bloodstream before, how it's like your water supply and you get little channels going along further and further. Now, if you have these LDL cholesterols within your bloodstream, they have the tendency to stick to your arterial walls. All right, they're very sticky and they stick there. All right, now when they stick to your arterial walls, it's very hard to get your blood through. Okay, very hard to get the blood through, and then you can't have your blood isn't supplying your muscles with amino acids. You're not supplying your muscles with carbohydrate. You're not getting that water through. You're not getting that oxygen through because you've got this bottleneck. All right, so you got this bottleneck there, and you got this fat all throughout your body. And what happens here is because you can't supply this oxygen, you can't supply it, you start to lose your fitness straight away. So you're trying to get this blood to its designated area, and it can't get there. All right, so straight away you're going to lose your fitness and you're going to start gaining weight. Now, the problem is that because there's such a blockage there, that builds up a blood pressure. All right, now your veins and your arteries, they have muscles around them. So it's not just your heart that pumps your blood around your body. You also have little muscles around every single vein and artery in your arms and your legs, and it helps push the blood along. All right? Now, just say, now you know when you go to the doctor and they put that strap on your arm, you get your blood pressure done, that's your systolic and your diastolic, that's your blood pressure. Now, because there's a bottleneck there, it's so much harder to push that blood along. And if it can't push it along with any ease, that's going to put more pressure on your heart, and that's going to increase that heart disease, all right? Increase that risk of heart disease. Now, you've got this pressure there. You've got this blood that's trying to force through your veins, and with all this pressure, you have this fat there, and just say you're 60 years old and you're pushing that mower along, and that blood pressure is starting to build up, and you've got this fat there, and a little bit of that fat just breaks off. Yeah, it just rips off, and it starts flowing along the bloodstream. Now your blood's pretty thin in comparison to this piece of fat that's just broken off, and this just starts flowing down. Now remember, your arteries, they turn into they get smaller, and eventually they start turning into your capillaries, which means it gets finer and finer and finer little pipes. Now, eventually that fat can get, if it doesn't dissolve, can get stuck in one of these smaller tubes, in one of these smaller capillaries, and now no more blood can get in there. All right, now when no more blood can get in there and you can't get oxygen there, now that's called a stroke. All right, so you might have a blockage in your heart where you've got very fine capillaries in your heart. You might have it in your brain too. All right, now this is when you can't feed that area of your body anymore because there's a blockage in the way. Now you also have atherosclerosis. Now what that is these little muscles that are around every single artery and they help pump it along, and they're having a hard time to pump along. All right, so just like your pancreas wears out, your muscles around your arteries, they wear out too, and then after a while they start to solidify and become like concrete. Now this is an irreversible process, and you can't rectify the problem once it's happened. Now just say you have these arteries that are now solid and they're not helping push through that blood anymore. That's going to put even more pressure on your heart and multiply the problem. Okay, so not all is lost. There is a savior, and that is, well, not exercise this time. This time it's your HDL fats. Now they're going to break down in your stomach just the same way as your bad fats, and they're going to taste just the same, pretty much. Now they break down and they end up being fatty acids in just the same way. Now when they flow through your bloodstream and they go through, they don't stick to your artery walls, but instead they start to dissolve those fatty acids that are built up against your arterial walls. All right, and they start breaking them down, and you can use them for energy. So you start to get a better blood flow, and you can start to feed every part of your body with the nutrients, everything that your blood supplies. So once again, you start to regain your fitness again. You're not putting any more pressure on your arteries and therefore back onto your heart. And it doesn't just dissolve the fat that's within your bloodstream, but it's also going to dissolve the fat around your belly, your subcutaneous fat. It also has the ability to do that as well. So the take-home message is make sure that your HDL and your LDL fats are equal, all right? And if possible, tip them in favor of your HDL fats. So have your fish oils, have your nuts, have your avocado. The fat still tastes just as good. Just don't have too much of this LDL fat, and make sure you get a blood test to see exactly where you're at. So here's another one, and here's a tricky one. Now this one's questionable, but not to me, all right? So you've heard about studies about, there's studies lately that are opposing separating carbohydrates from your fat, and some that are for, all right? Now I've separated the carbs and fat for myself and found that it works very well, and I've done it for my clients as well, and I find that it does work very well. Now here's the theory behind it. When you have carbohydrates, you have an insulin response to that carbohydrate, as we know. So you have that response there. Now you have that insulin hormone, which is a storage hormone. Yeah, it wants to store something. Yeah. Now if you filled up your muscles and you can't store any more in there, you're going to store it in your fat cells, and you can store as much as you want in those fat cells. It goes to infinity. Now, when you put fat within your system, it does not have an insulin response. Insulin does not get secreted when you put fat in there. All right, so it's very hard for that fat to get into the fat cell. All right, it'll just keep on floating around your bloodstream. It'll just stay there and just keep on. It doesn't have that desperate storage. But your carbohydrates do have an insulin response. So if you put them into your bloodstream at the same time, it now makes it possible to be able to get that carbohydrate into that fat cell, and now you also have the possibility of being able to get that fat into the fat cell as well. So you have that triple whammy of, remember, you've got 4 calories of carbohydrate and 9 calories of fat that's now able to store into there. So that's the theory behind it. I find it works very well. So carbohydrates and proteins, you can have them together. That's all right. All right. Now you can have your proteins and your fats together. That's okay as well. But for the most optimal way to lose fat, separate your carbohydrates from your fats, and that way you'll find the most optimal way and the most successful way to losing fat. So, fat is high in calories, can be categorized as good and bad fats, HDL and LDL. Now we need to balance your HDL and your LDL cholesterol so you're in favor of HDL, right? So you can start to dissolve that fat within your arteries and dissolve that fat which is on your body. And if you can, try to keep the carbohydrates away from your fats.